Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Charlie Williams.
Let's do this. Welcome back. I was a little worried that you guys may not come back after that weather outside, So we're going to lock the doors. Is that all right? Hey, so I hope you enjoyed lunch. We have a wonderful afternoon for you in terms of this panel that's going to come out and talk to you a little bit about emerging technologies. But before I do anything else, let me thank our sponsors who do phenomenal work in support of this event each and every year. So I want to thank our sponsors. I would particularly want to thank our gold sponsors, Unison and Deltek. And let me call particular attention to the new partnership between Deltek and ProPricer, who are creating a marketplace of capabilities around pricing. So it's a one-stop shop partnership that's going to deliver tremendous pricing capability to our customers and your customers. And I got to tell you, in the space that I work in acquisition and contracting as a consultant, it's a much-needed capability. So congratulations to ProPricer and Deltek. Now, look, how many of you heard this morning, what about Joy White? What a great presentation. I have known Joy for a long time, and she's just doing tremendous work in the Space Command, and we're just so proud of her. But did you hear this morning, somebody asked a question. Someone said, what is Space Command and the space acquisition community doing to leverage technology to provide agility inside that space? And what was her answer? Does anybody remember? No, not so much, right? Not so much. We're still working on it, a lot to do. Unfortunately, I hear that a lot across the federal government and the space that I work in. And so that's why we have this wonderful panel that's going to come talk to us a little bit about how do we leverage emerging technology to become a force multiplier to provide efficient and effective agile solutions to our customers. We all heard of the different RPA and blockchain and artificial intelligence. And I'll tell you that the federal government is probably the slowest uptake of artificial intelligence capabilities and leveraging that technology to improve the speed to the result. And so we're looking forward to hearing from this panel. A great friend of mine, Dr. Mike Wooten, is going to come out and bring his panel. Let me give you a little bit about Dr. Mike Wooten. Now, Dr. Mike Wooten today is the Vice President for Strategy at the National Industries for the Blind. Prior to becoming the Vice President for Strategy at NIB, Dr. Wooten was the Administrator for the Office of Federal Procurement Policy. Now, if you don't know, Office of Federal Procurement Policy reports to OMB and delivers tremendous policy in the federal contracting and acquisition space. In fact, it is the place that puts together the policy that goes into legislation and or drives the FAR and the Federal Acquisition Regulation. Prior to that, Dr. Mike Wooten was the Assistant Secretary for Career Technical and Adult Education in the Department of Education. And prior to that, he was the Deputy Chief Procurement Officer for the District of Columbia. Now, he has a tremendous set of education and experiences, besides the fact he's a PhD. He's got a couple of master's degrees. But maybe more important than anything on his resume, he's a former Marine. Hoorah! Dr. Mike Wooten, please come to the stage. The panel come join you? You want them to join you?
Yes. Yeah. Well, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm enjoying being here, kind of seeing your faces. It looks like you're in the witness protection program, though, with these bright lights in my faces. And don't worry, you don't need the lights. We'll talk. But yeah, it's great to be here. I was sharing it on a personal note that it's great to be back in San Diego because I rarely get to see it. But I was born here almost 63 years to the day. So loved the experience of coming back in time.
It's your birthday.
It's not my birthday. It was a couple of days ago.
Okay.
Almost 63 years to the day. But enough about me. I'd like to have the experts who join me on the stage introduce themselves, and I'll start from my left and work on to the other end of the stage. So without further ado, Carla, please.
Hi, I'm Carla Smith-Jackson. I'm the Assistant Administrator for Procurement for NASA, also the Deputy Chief Acquisition Officer for NASA. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Michael Weaver, the Director of Corporate Strategy for ProPricer, and I'm here to learn about what we're going to be doing to make your lives easier.
All right. I'm Brad Arterberry. I'm a product specialist at Deltek covering our PPM products. And I have the honor of working with our defense community and most of our prime contractors. And pretty much everybody today is going through some sort of digital transformation initiative. And part of that digital transformation initiative is technology. The common pillars are people, processes, and technology. And so to the extent that we can talk about how do we leverage these emerging technologies to the benefit of efficiencies in processes to serve people better, I think is kind of where our contractor community is trying to go with these different emerging technologies.
Well, thank you. So as we get ready to dive into this, let's ease in with a bit more about our backgrounds and some of the things that we thought about, or the ways we thought about using technology through our experiences. And this time I'd like to just come from the far end and work my way in, if I may. So please continue. Talk about the things that you're starting to see. We could use this here, and also the challenges.
Yeah, so I've been in the technology space for 20 years, saw the emergence of supercomputers from kind of big iron up to distributed computing with like storage area networks and high performance computing clusters into what we now call cloud computing, and then the infrastructure as a service with like AWS and Google and Azure nowadays. And as that processing power has proliferated, then it's just a proliferation of data, right? And then we as humans need a way to process that amount of data. So the business intelligence and analytics solutions is what I've mostly been focusing on the last 9 years, trying to figure out what's the best way we can work with this and leverage it to our benefit.
Wow, I've been doing IT for 25 years now, ever since I was voluntold in the Marines to be the IT guy for our group. I was an auditor, so technology wasn't something that I was really passionate about or understood, like I didn't even know how to print. But pick it up kind of quickly and start moving through my career until I come here, coming up in the help desk and going through technical support and eventually product management. I just realized that we and this is just technology in general, a lot of us are very reactionary to what we're doing when we build stuff or when we integrate things. And so I had the opportunity as an implementation person, as a consultant, to go in and talk with people and see what they were doing and sort of diagnose the parts of the process that were broken and how can we optimize that? How can we create more productivity? How can we make your life easier? So as going into the product management part of that, that's exactly where I wanted to focus. It's how do I allow you to use this application more, ProPricer more, by actually using it less? My goal isn't to have you using that product for 8 hours in a given day. I'd rather use it for 15 to 45 minutes a day so that you can go on to do what the rest of your job is. And so now, it's oddly enough, COVID, the benefit that it had, the moving people to remote places and having that interconnectivity, we saw a lot of the places that we work for were very reactionary in how are we going to have uptime, how are we going to get connectivity, how are we able to get access to our business systems and be able to use those. And so that's created a major push for not only us to continue to be reactionary, but to kind of sit back and think about where we can go and what we can do to have a single source of truth as it moves through the entire proposal pricing process, from RFP let to negotiation and award and earn value and all of that through all of it, how can we create a single place where all of the data, you regain some of the productivity? Like, I hate Excel as a middleware. I don't like exporting, copying and pasting, mapping, re-importing stuff in. How can we move things cyclically through all of the different applications, make sure that everything is secure, and whether it's in the cloud or whether it's on-prem, how do we make sure that the right people are having the right access to the right things and able to do that in such a way that's very fast and you eliminate errors and increase productivity?
I'm a career civil servant, procurement professional for 31 years. Started as an intern right out of college, and my experience is pretty much having to crank through proposals, do that cost price analysis, prepare negotiation positions. Spent about 27 years of my career in the Department of Defense, everything from major systems, launch services, professional engineering services, R&D, and then going over, I spent some time with Department of Homeland Security, doing some work there with the United States Coast Guard, as well as headquarters, working policy, acquisition policy and legislation. And then I am now at NASA as the senior procurement executive. So one of the things I learned early, I spent some time at DCMA as a deputy executive director of contracts with respect to pricing. We actually stood up the Consolidated Pricing Center, Cost and Pricing Center under Dave Rickey and Mr. Charlie Williams. When I was there, was the power of shared information and knowledge. And what that means is the technology that we now have allows us to share access to information to ease or make an easier time of doing analysis, looking at cost estimating relationships, building your analysis in spreadsheets. And so my interest with respect to why I believe I'm here on this panel is that at NASA, we are moving from what I would say a 10-center decentralized procurement structure to an enterprise procurement structure. And so we are now investigating tools, techniques, and different ways to leverage technology to share that information across a single enterprise and leverage what we consider the space or the commercial space technology world of work, as well as what we call new space, and how to apply pricing tools as well as analytical tools to be able to develop our negotiation positions. If we're successful at that, that will, to a great extent, reduce our cycle time to award. So ultimately what we're trying to do is get awards faster and field our space systems and space technologies faster. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think as you heard from my colleagues here on the stage, you heard some ideas that might have sparked your imagination about the kinds of things we can do with the kinds of technologies that exist to be able to close the time from solicitation to contract award, to be able to leverage data and pull data in, not just from the agencies that in the federal government that presently do not communicate with each other very well, but also from the commercial enterprises to figure out where the data are and then help inform us to make the better pricing decisions. There are some great ideas that I thought we heard here today. I'd like to just recount my recent experience as the administrator for federal procurement policy, where we basically outlined a vision for frictionless acquisition. Now, where did that idea come from? Well, the help of some very smart people at OFPP, but it was really helping to gel a contract, if you will, that I had with the senators when I went through the confirmation process. One of the things they asked were, how are you going to deal with the complexity? What are you going to change? And most of you are pretty experienced, and if you had that question, what would you say? What are you going to change in the federal regulations? And I was prepared for that question, so I told them the complex system that we have is made up of statutes, and I paused so that could sink in with the senators asking me the question, where do statutes come from? With statutes, regulation, and case law. This is a Gordian knot, and you're asking me where to cut the knot. And I told them that. But still, they were looking for a solution. Okay, it's complex. Still, we need for the agencies to be able to know that they can go to us, get the best value, and not take as much time. After all, one of the other things I remember very clearly telling the senators was that there are some agencies that will look at a regulation and can buy a requirement in 6 weeks. Others will look at the same requirement and they take 6 months. Why? Why? A lot of that is fear, but a lot of that is because we have human beings doing the different processes. So back to frictionless acquisition. We talked about some of the ways we could use technology to speed up some of the processes. And if I could use an example from 1960s management theory, you have some very flow-chartable processes. You don't have to make decisions. You just have to recognize what you're seeing and then follow the flow chart and do the next thing. Those are flow chartable processes, or what we would call program decisions. Well, RPA is brilliant for handling program decisions. It recognizes that this happened, it goes to the next step, and oftentimes, for things like compliance checks, RPA can do it in milliseconds where it takes us weeks. And then we also talked about what I called higher order artificial intelligence, natural language processing, machine learning, and I would add from the conversation we're having here, big data analysis. Things that will help us when we aren't faced with program decisions, but we're faced with those knotty problems that don't have clear processes, those decisions we call non-program decisions. And I believe that a lot of these tools are ripe for us to be able to leverage in solving non-program decisions and assisting us. Assisting us in the same ways, for example, when I get ready to send a text and I'm halfway through the sentence, the text finishes my sentences for me faster than my wife does. It does it the same way in the email. Can you imagine having the kind of expert software that can help you retool a statement of work from scratch so that you're not just cutting and pasting in the slipshod manner that we're often forced to do because we're under a time crunch? Can you imagine that kind of technology? And being able to pull from other agencies or even commercial entities best practices. So that's what we were talking about with frictionless acquisition, but it also had us looking at two other things. Okay, if we're going to do that, you can't just change one thing and expect that there's only going to be one change. Other things change. If we change the speed, we're going to have to tweak some of the regulations or definitely the processes within the agencies. If we change the speed and we implement artificial intelligence, we're going to have to change the way we teach people. We teach them right now to be process workers, to follow program decisions. But in the future, if we implement this, we're going to have to teach them how to be critical thinkers and work alongside an artificial intelligence coach in solving non-program decisions. So I wanted to wrap this up in the whole frictionless acquisition thought, because while administrations come and go, and we're out, and the Biden administration's there are certain things that are going to be constant. And by the way, when we came up with the moniker frictionless acquisition, is because someone really smart on the OFPP team told me, Mike, you can't say faster, better, cheaper. That was a different administration. You'll get in trouble with your bosses. Don't say faster, better, cheaper. But that's what we need. So we talked about frictionless acquisition. It's the same thing. That moniker and that program might go away, but that need is going to remain. And I believe that the tools we talked about are going to be highly useful. So having said that, I share the stage with people who have far more expertise in dealing with pricing in particular. When we talked about frictionless acquisition, we were really looking heavily at the pre-award and up to award processes, and oftentimes people forget about pricing. And today, I think we need to put that at the forefront. So I'll yield to my colleagues. Any good examples that you can think of where we actually can solve some knotty pricing problems, or some common ubiquitous pricing problems where we might be able to save a lot across the federal government, a lot in terms of time or dollars?
I know one of the things that we were kind of interested in is looking at NASA, we're shifting from a hardware-centric buying to service-centric buying, whereby the hardware is delivered as a second or an ancillary piece, and then we just use the hardware almost like a rent situation. One of the things we're looking at is what are the commercial pricing models that we could leverage? What work is being done in that area so that we don't have to go and create something from scratch? Many times when you're looking at unique purchases, you're using a commercial marketplace, but you can't compare one-to-one. It's not really a price list, but it's commercial pricing, meaning commercial services. And so what could we leverage in the technology space that would allow us to do that much faster? Even to the point where we're doing, you said, compliance reviews and checks. If we can eliminate the need for that particular human resource or those particular resources, to free them up to do the higher level thinking and analysis with respect to pricing. So that's something we're looking at.
My answer might be a little bit longer, so you're going to have to cut me off, I think. Okay, so I look at this from two different perspectives. First, I'll talk about it from the contractor perspective. Next, I'll talk about it from the government perspective. They both center around the same context of interconnectivity. So think about the business systems. Oh, that was me. Okay, good. Think about the business systems that you're using and the work you have to do to hunt things down or try to find something from somewhere in the process, getting a hold of the right people, getting access to that right data. The technology platforms that we're using are made to be interconnected. And so we need to streamline the integrations between whatever you're using for your earned value or whatever you're using for your proposal pricing, whatever you're using for the SMEs to actually put the BOEs together, and make sure that management has the ability to see everything from the big picture level. So they can sort of see a heat map of where their people are being utilized. It helps them with their staffing and their planning. They can see from the BOEs as they're being written, how closely are they being monitored against historical actuals versus the swag that, John Q. Engineer just put together. Being able to see the data, how it relates to itself, and how accurate that is, and how easy it is to move from start to finish, brings a lot of productivity and gives you the opportunity to do the actual analysis portion before you submit the contract. How likely are we to win this? Where should we put our challenges? What are the real risks? We can actually stop worrying about the capture portion of it, where we're trying to get the numbers in the system and actually type that stuff in and actually do the part where you're using your brain and not doing the programmatic process. You're doing the analysis portion where you say, on the last project, we were off by about 7% on this. That's going to get us a little bit more accurate in terms of the submittal. So being able to do that type of analysis. On the government side, I look at the big picture, not just internally within a given agency, but across agencies. So we've got presidents within the DoD, Army and Air Force, Navy, DCMA, DCAA. I would like for you to imagine the scenario where you can accomplish two basic things. One is, say we're buying a tank, and we are buying a new model of a tank, and we bought it for $5 million per unit cheaper than we bought the last tank. And so we feel good about that because we saved $5 million worth of money on this individual tank. But we still don't know if we're getting a good price on that tank because we have no relative context for what other people paid for tanks. So imagine the ability to communicate with other agencies and bulk buy even with those people to see who else is buying tanks, what they paid for those tanks, what rates were being used, how everybody's being audited. All of the data is there and can be shared, and you can reach out across to different people to find out, hey, we can award this faster, we can buy it for cheaper, we can streamline the whole proposal process on both sides of this, and we can get the contractors to get that award, through into the award faster, and we can start monitoring the program and looking and learn from that and use it as part of the, the beginning for where we go on the next thing. And so it's the ability to see, hey, I've got a better price, but I actually know it's a good price, and the ability to team with other agencies or other people out there by having access to what everybody is doing in a way that I can say, hey, we need 250,000 seats of Microsoft Office. Let's not buy it at a program office level. Let's buy it DoD-wide. And now everybody gets it for a third of the cost of what they would have paid if we all bought it piecemeal and individually. So the capability that we have with, whether it's cloud computing and artificial intelligence to help pre-write and make that stuff go faster so you can do more of the analysis with the AI's help, or the interconnectivity that you get on both sides of that process, the technology right now is very ripe for us to be able to reap those benefits and make everybody here more productive and save time and money. Soapbox.
Yeah. No, I think that's great with respect to the strategic pricing and the insight there. The other piece I would say is changes and being able to see through the supply chain. What's going on in the supply chain. If you bought something 5 years ago, you look at prices previously paid, what's happened in the marketplace, how have things moved, how have things become more efficient. A lot of times we struggle with being able to see down into the supply chain with the subcontractor base. So to the extent that there are tools, and that's what we're kind of researching, looking for ways to be able to leverage the buying power of the whole government or government agencies that are buying similar services or similar commodities.
And it's even better when artificial intelligence can do that for you.
Absolutely.
So you get notified when there's a potential risk at play, rather than trying to be lucky enough to catch it, and to see if you can find it.
Let's do that. That's a good idea.
Work in progress, my man.
So all of this relies on machine learning, right? So machine learning is sort of the basis of how these things come to fruition. RPA, natural language generation, and then just to give a more tangible kind of, how can this specifically help the pricing community? Optical character recognition, OCR, just looking at a document and, it might not be computer readable, it's handwritten letter or whatever, right? But being able to parse something out and put it into electronic format, that's one step. But then you put machine learning on top of it, then you have intelligent character recognition. Now the system can start to recognize, all right, I see this is a receipt. I see this as a vendor receipt. It may be structured in a different way than I've ever seen one before, but based on how I have learned from previous submissions, I can parse this thing out and put it into the system in its right, like, component data parts. So we don't have a person that has to go do data entry now. Right? That's just one really easy example. And it's not that much world changing, but I sure appreciate it whenever I'm scanning my receipts from this trip, right? And that's the real world application of intelligent character recognition.
Right. It's the little things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's the OCR example is so important. I remember seeing a font called OCR back in the late 80s or early 90s. But what it can do for us is it helps us draw data from the analog world and put it into the digital world. And on top of OCR, we have voice recognition. And that was, I'm gonna use a term that aggravates my wife, but she's not here. That was janky. The software for voice recognition was janky. It just didn't work that well.
Yep.
It's getting better and better. How did I do, Siri? It's getting better and better. It understands what we're saying in different accents and different contexts, and it can learn.
Your emotion, it's recognizing everything.
Yes. And so these are important softwares software tools that I think we're retrying, and we're able to do more with it because of the other tools and artificial intelligence capabilities that are coming into the environment.
And on that line, that also allows us to leverage diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, the use of some of these tools. And we're finding opportunities to attract different people into the workforce that have other needs and other requirements using the same thing.
So you mentioned, hey Siri. So Deltek has a product.
Everyone's phone just went nuts.
Hey Deltek.
Yeah, sorry about that.
You could say, go do this within the system, right? Go initiate a particular workflow. Well, that's just the first step of what we can do, right? So as we start to apply these technologies, now the machine learning can start to predict what you need to do next, and then maybe start to recommend that you take that step.
Right.
Or if you've forgotten to do something, say, hey, whoa, you need to stop and go back and do this. Now, maybe RPA replaces the need for that even, but the sort of proactive, hey Siri, is where we're going towards next, where you'd say, all right, it's the end of the month. We know you need to do these 3 things around this time every month. I've seen you do it every month since then. Let me go ahead and tap you on the shoulder as your personal assistant and suggest that you start on that.
One of the areas where the people that I work with are probably tired of hearing me say it, but where we can leverage AI inside of something like ProPricer, well, as we continue to build the additional companion products that we are, like the BOE writer or the cash flow or cost volume generator, the pieces that exist outside of the pricing piece, this gives you the opportunity, or when you link with Cobra or with CostPoint stuff, you have this AI piece that sits on top of it, to where when you get an RFP, it can look at it and it can say, this is 67% similar to work that I've done in the past. So what I'm going to do is start breaking that into SAL chunks, or my paragraphs. I can then go look at my EVMS or my budget versus actuals. I can go look at historical proposals. I can look at the different BOEs that people have written that are, say, 95% similar, and I can read those SAL paragraphs and start pre-writing what the BOEs are. I can then read those BOE inputs and start generating the actual priced inputs, so that by the time the subject matter expert is going in and actually looking at what the BOE or writing the BOEs, it's more about a corrective action or a tweak rather than coming up with that thing from scratch or having to go find, previous stuff. And then as it moves through the rest of the proposal process, you've also got the cost volume that's being pre-generated. So we notice that you typically put your direct rates here. The ones that you're using in this proposal are here. Let me put that in a table for you. Let me show what your indirect rates are. What's your forward pricing rate agreement? Let me put the right pieces in the right place for you. So it's more of a, it's more of a review part of it. There's still a lot of human component that goes to this, but this is just that productivity part of it, where we're trying to speed up. And quick little shameless plug here. For the BOE writer that we are building, you can go see Nick and get a demo of that and provide input and feedback, so that we can build that type of tool that I'm talking about to make sure that it's suiting what your needs are. So, end plug.
So I want to respond to some of the questions that are coming in. How was that last cough? That wasn't frightening, was it? Yeah, my wife says she gave me a bunch of nice meds so that I am doing better, but I am allergic to just about everything that's not fermented. So
That's a wonderful problem to have.
yeah, it is, but better be careful. Those allergies can come too. One of the questions that I saw earlier, I don't see it now, but I seem to remember that there was a question about the challenge of implementing these tools that we're talking about, implementing the technologies. And I wanted to ask my colleagues here on the stage, what are some of the challenges that you've faced, or some of the challenges we still have to figure out how to meet to be able to implement some of these really good tools?
So
Yeah,
I'd like to jump in first as the customer before they sell me something. But as far as from the person that will be buying these tools, we need something that's user-friendly. I can do a quick training, or I can do micro training, and you don't have to be a computer programmer to use. We need something that is fairly quick, and that as people move from agency to agency, they can use that tool and they don't have to learn something new every time they go to a different place. And so that's what I'd like to submit to.
You're selling us for me. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's kind of what we do.
Yeah, so, it's always organizational change management. That's always the biggest hurdle that you have to overcome. So getting people on board with the change in the first place, whether it's a big change or a small change, it's change, and that just creates something in people for some reason. So you have to really have good communication and make sure that everyone understands the reasons, and you've done the vetting of, what are your concerns before you go and introduce that change.
For me, it's the having the right resources. Having somebody that understands what AI is and what its capabilities are and can implement something like that into the product is something that we can't ask, our resident geniuses like JB or Andre or somebody to go in and say, hey, like you program this, so now you should be really good at AI too. So getting the right resources, the people with the knowledge and the understanding of how it's supposed to work, but then it's also about content. So we have to find a way to partner with people that are in this room so that it can recognize what an RFP is, where that data went into BOEs and where it went into estimates, how that data was priced, and how it looks in something like an earned value management system. It has to be able to see that data and how it moves and have an understanding. And every single one of you does it differently. Even within the same company or the same agency, you do proposals differently. So taking like a one size fits all approach to this is impossible. We need more people to actually help us go through that process so that the machine learning can actually learn and understand. And it's not like we're just building it for, say, Deltek, right? We can't build a model that recognizes what Deltek does and then sell it to the rest of you or have the rest of you use it. So it's finding the right people that can actually code that and know how to use it and build it and make it better. But it's also having an understanding of the data that you do and how your proposal process works so that we can incorporate that into something that anybody can use, but the model keeps learning and growing the more that it sees, so it gets better over time. It's like a Tesla, right? They go up in value, they never go down in value. So it's kind of the same approach, that you have to keep giving it more so that it understands how to do that process better.
So while you have the stage, I have a question that has your name all over it.
Uh-oh.
Here we go. We're forced to provide agency-specific Excel cost volumes that take forever to complete and are wrong. How can we, please respond. Yeah.
Was that a collective groan?
It was.
Okay.
Yeah. How can we eliminate this process and submit the ProPricer file?
That's the question that we're trying to answer ourselves. If everybody just bought ProPricer, of course, it would be the perfect world for us. So you're all here for that. Thank you. Talk to Brian, Carl, Stacy, arrange that. But the thing is, you can use ProPricer to create any custom output. And we're actually building a cost volume generator to help solve part of that problem. A solution that's specifically geared towards accomplishing that and the output layout that you need. But you have to prove value. You have to go to a government agency and say, first you got to find out who they are and get in touch with them. And they're probably so swamped and crazy overworked and crazy deadlines, and they don't have the time to worry about the change or to change what they're doing. But you have to, when you get that shot, you have to prove the value so that you can say there is a better way to do this. Because every single one of you in this audience has gone to a previous Excel file, copied it or saved as, deleted some stuff, and repopulated it with new data, or tweaked some of the existing data that was there. And it's really hard to especially if you've done this 5 and 6 and 10 times, you may have an error embedded into one of those formulas or a cell that's unlocked that somebody made a change to that you're not aware of and you have no visibility over, but you're in such a rush to get things done that you're just filling in what you can, and since you don't have the time for that analysis portion, you don't catch that. And it's something that may be caught by DCAA or DCMA that's coming to you and saying, like, where's this $12 billion coming from? So you have to catch people at a time where they actually understand that there is a problem. You can't convince somebody that there's a problem that they don't know exists yet. So they have to understand that there's a problem. You have to put the right solution in front of them, and you have to prove its value. And so there isn't a magic bullet for that. That's, as a company, what we've been trying to figure out for the 34 years that we've been in business, or longer. But come see me, come talk to me, give me 30 minutes and I can convince you there's a problem, I hope, and that we're going to build you the right solution. Anybody else?
Well, I will say from the government perspective, it sounds like that's coming from an industry partner. When you see things like that, we all make mistakes, to your point, Michael, that you were saying. We do want to know if those mistakes exist, and we do want to improve our processes. If there is a better way to skin the cat, I would implore you to reach out to your contracting officer. If that doesn't work, you can go all the way up to the senior procurement executive at my level, or any agency level senior executive that's in the procurement world. And we want to know about that. We want to correct things. We want to get better. We want to be more agile. And so I just feel like I just want to make sure, don't ignore if things that are broken, because we're definitely trying to improve.
Since we're talking about emerging technology, like this might be an area where blockchain can actually help through the entire supply chain and in the interactions between government and industry. So, that's an area that we could all kind of look at and say, all right, where can we actually apply blockchain where it can be useful in the work that we do?
Can you talk a little bit more about blockchain? Because I'm probably the only, no?
I'm not your blockchain expert.
I'm definitely not.
It's so complicated.
But I know that is something that we're going to need to understand in the federal government. I know that blockchain raises some concerns that are not just about blockchain, but also about other emerging technologies, concerns such as security and privacy. When if you know anything about those, the blockchain will probably actually solve more security or privacy problems than it will create, or particularly security. But I'm a novice at this. I'm not the blockchain expert. But as you mentioned that, I am curious to know, and I invite someone to either come in with a question or a comment, or even if you can be heard from the audience here, someone who might know about things or problems that blockchain can solve, or even better, problems that blockchain is currently solving in the federal government. So while we wait for a response on that, I also wanted to go back to the question of implementing the new technologies. I didn't hear anybody talk about the legacy systems, and they're still around. And now some of the things that we brought in to replace the legacy systems have become legacy systems, because that's just how the federal government likes to build things. We like to build things like monuments. They should last 50 years. So, thoughts. Are we solving the problem of moving past legacy systems or integrating with legacy systems, and what are some of the challenges we're still going to face, because we have some big agencies that are wedded to these systems?
I think the biggest challenge is confidence in the new system, right? The reason why people hold on to these legacy systems is, one, they know how to operate them, going back to user-friendly, so it's familiar. But then there's a level of confidence that's been built with that legacy system. When there's something new, a lot of people's experiences, there's a glitch in it, there's a workaround. We used to call something called a bent trash can. You had to put that in there so you could figure out how you worked around it. But that's my perspective, and it's about building confidence in the new system so that, we can transition successfully, in my mind.
Change is scary. I've got my task list, the things that I do them in that order, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it, or if it ain't broke enough, don't worry about fixing it. And so, you guys know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's one of those things that I don't have a reason to change what I'm doing, or what I'm doing, I haven't resolved the pain points enough in my own mind to understand that there is a problem. And so, since that would involve me changing for the sake of change, because I don't understand what that big picture is, then I'm going to keep using it. Side note, the elevators use Windows XP. I saw mine reboot the other day, and I thought, that's still around. All right.
Yeah. So some of the advancements in like data lakes and data warehousing has taken some of that concern away. Some of the previous concern around replacing legacy systems is just data integrity, right? The data is different, and so you would have to do some sort of transformation and use an ETL tool to move it from one database into the data lake or the data warehouse. And that technology is mature now, so that concern's kind of off the table. So now it's just really about trusting the new tools and the new processes can do things, and especially in the government contracting world, in a way that's compliant with the requirements of the system. And that may also just take testing, right? You may have to go through an 18, 24-month test cycle just to make sure that it does before you actually flick the switch.
And that requires people doing both systems at the same time, which makes the problem even worse.
Yep.
So, it gets rough.
So I asked the question about the challenge that legacy systems bring to implementing some of the newer technologies and artificial intelligence. But let me flip the question around. Do we have any experience with or knowledge of instances where we've used the technologies to actually allow legacy systems to stay in place? In other words, we need this legacy system, but it doesn't talk to these other agencies. We can, I'm going to coin a term here, we can Frankenstitch our system so that the legacy system can talk to the new thing that the federal government has to pay for, and it can talk to the other agencies. We have any experiences with...
That's where business intelligence comes from.
Yeah.
It's taking all these disparate legacy systems and finding a way to interconnect them so that I can use that data in a way that actually is usable and makes sense and is transferable to other systems. So I think probably, I can't just qualify this and say late 90s, that was really bad. We've seen kind of a couple of technological shifts where, we went to mainframe and then to, client server and then to cloud, and the pattern of this stuff sits in place for a long time before the actual swing goes up to the new technology, and you still have to find a way to interconnect that data and to be able to use it. So I think all of us have gone through that at various places that we worked, where there's a system that is clearly on its last leg and you're still forced to use it, and it could be your email, it could be your time card system, it could be your pricing solution, whatever it is. It's the panic that if that goes down, we're screwed because there's no way to bring that data back, or there's no way to recreate that application, or if there's a Windows update that inadvertently blows up the system and we can't use it anymore, there's no redundancy, there's no reliability. And so business intelligence was kind of start to address that problem. But the interconnectivity that you're talking about, being able to take data and pull it without even a direct API connection, just being able to push data between the systems, is a way for us to alleviate that.
Right, yep. And then how do you make executables, right? So it's one thing if you can standardize the data across all of your systems and be able to work with it from an analytics and business intelligence standpoint, but then how do you create workflows between systems so that, just like the integration that we're working on between CostPoint and Cobra and ProPricer, right? How do you let the data just flow seamlessly between systems at the click of a button?
Or the schedule of a nightly dump of procurement stuff, whatever it is, yeah.
So, Michael, I'm getting ready to respond, or you're getting ready to respond to another question from the audience. So here we go. As ProPricer gains more customers that could be transitioning away from homegrown tools, are they also looking externally at those tools and processes to procure or take solutions from things they see?
We try to steal as much as we can. So I think other people do it too. But what's going to make management happy is to have a COTS solution that you don't have to spend a lot of money integrating or making changes to or customizing in some way. You want a nice COTS solution that is sort of generic enough to do everything. Not too many workarounds, not too many things where you feel like there are pain points, and something that's easy to use. There's not a long, uptick period. Those are the kind of the areas that we've tried to focus on, where we look at it and we say, okay, why is this column in your proposal? Like, here's a field that you're putting a value in, and what does that represent? So I can tell you where that data goes in ProPricer. And they will say, we have no idea. It was in the system from before and the system from before, and it's just there, and we know we need that column in that spot for all of our other stuff to work. So doing the implementation side of things, where you go in and you start looking at problems, you get to sit back and see where are they spending a lot of time, where are the spots that they have to go back and double check, who's doing the peer review on these specific areas, and how can we make that process easier? Sometimes it's better when you have somebody to come in and tell you this is how screwed up you are, or these are areas where you need to make improvement. But having a solution that is easy enough to use and generic or customizable enough off the shelf that you can integrate or build those pieces that you need without having to say, okay, now I need to ramp up a 9-month development cycle for us to be able to do this one thing differently than everybody else does it. You know, we're all completely special, but we're not as special as we think. We're all based off of what the FAR is. It's telling you, here's what's an allowable cost, here's what's unallowable, here's what I can charge, here's how cost of money works, here are my different contract types. We're all trying to remain competitive in a space where the rules are pretty strict and clear. And so kind of taking away from what your built up business practices are and going into a solution that actually allows you to be customizable but generic, I think is a way to avoid some of the pitfalls that you may have had with, you know, applications that you've used or that you've built that are, you know, pigeonholed into a very specific response. It also makes it easier to hire people. So if somebody used, like to your point, if somebody was using ProPricer somewhere and you say, hey, I'd like to find somebody that has ProPricer experience, you know, they come right in and hit the ground running. They understand how the solution works. They can use the application. They can start pricing. They may have to learn what your naming conventions are for, you know, what your overhead elements are and stuff like that. But they understand how ProPricer works. They don't understand how to build reports. And so it makes it an attractive place to come work because you have people that may be hopping from contractor to contractor or agency to agency, and it makes it easy for you to hire.
Well, folks, we're getting down to close to the 5-minute mark where I knew I wanted to ask a question that I did not prepare you all for.
Okay.
It'll be fun. They're nimble, they're highly intelligent, and they're in leadership roles, and they'll be able to respond to this. Simply, this is the question I have. As we think about all of the tools, the potential applications, can you give us some interesting predictions? What's going to happen in the future? What kind of things should we expect to see that we might not have been thinking of? And yeah, I caught them flat-footed here, asking them for predictions. And I think we'll hear some interesting comments.
Did you read the headlines this weekend?
Yeah.
So evidently,
not sports betting either.
yeah. So Google might have created a sentient AI already. That's the headlines from the weekend. I say that tongue in cheek because they probably haven't, but it's actually in the news.
I wish you'd let me turn Siri off before you said that. I get paranoid, but continue.
That's probably far away, but the likelihood of using machine learning, a subset of AI, to allow for that like personal assistant, like I was talking about earlier, that can actually help you in your day-to-day tasks, is not far off. That's within a 5-year window, probably.
I think more in augmented reality and seeing the world through a different lens. I think that's coming more specific to what we're talking about. I think that the IT budgets for most of the large contractors or medium-sized contractors are going to be cut significantly because the cost of the overhead and maintenance of, you know, running big server rooms or, you know, 10 different disparate data centers. You definitely want to shrink that. With how much technology is changing, and it's, you know, it's an exponentially, you know, growth of especially AI like we're talking, as fast as that's changing, you really want to go to the specialists. So whether that you're putting your stuff on like Azure or, you know, S3, you're having cloud hosted stuff, because that is a company that is dedicated to the always uptime, having the right amount of hardware, can spin things up and down really quickly and load applications and present them to you. It's going to take us away from that, well, I've got to schedule, you know, a ProPricer upgrade. We've got to schedule that 6 months out. We've got to make sure that we have budget for it. We've got to get server space. We've got to make sure that IT understands what's happening. You know, we're gonna find it easier to adapt to changes in technology because technology is going to force us into, you know, a deployed framework. You know, we're not going to have that server room with a high AC bill every month, like we've all had.
So from my perspective, I see like an intersection between the IT career field and the procurement career field, more so than where we're going right now. I think the other piece is I see a big leverage. In fact, when I was at what was ICAF, now Eisenhower School, in 2007, I wrote a paper about specialization versus generalization. And so in my mind, how we buy, it's more strategic sourcing like, but with respect to pricing and commodity buying, I think we're going to start going to specialists across the government. And that's how we'll be procuring a lot of the goods and services, where everybody doesn't do everything in that kind of fashion, more of an enterprise type, but for the federal government. I don't think we can afford the infrastructure that we've built with respect to the workforce and the way that we procure goods and services right now. So that's my crystal ball for that.
So Mike, before you let your panel go, I've got some important questions for you, right? And so a lot of small businesses, and I picked this up from some of the questions coming in, a lot of small businesses sit back and say, you guys are talking about those big guys out there. You're talking about tools and technologies that big companies leverage all the time, but I'm a small business, right? And I need the same capabilities to leverage artificial intelligence the way the big guys. What are you doing for me? And I suspect, Carla, that in your agency, as you guys seek to leverage non-traditionals and small businesses through your contracts, you need them to have the same capabilities, right?
Exactly.
As big guys.
Exactly.
So what are we doing?
And that was the point that I was making about a commercial pricing model, that it goes back to your COTS off the shelf, that would be helpful for us as we're doing with business that doesn't do federal business.
For us, that's exactly the purpose of the ProPricer Contractor Edition Essentials. It's the cloud-based version of our application that you can go and sign up for and grab your seats, and you are leveraging the same pricing engine, all of the technology, the reporting, the capabilities that a large contractor has used, but you don't have to worry about that IT infrastructure. It's already cloud hosted. It's already, NIST 800-171 compliant, CMMC version 2, level 2, when that comes out, it'll be that compliant. So you know that the data is secured. It's hosted on Azure GCC High, and you have the same tools at your fingertips that any of the large contractors do. You just don't need the large infrastructure to use it.
Okay, one other question.
Charlie, I do want to say this though, because I didn't prepare for the prediction question either. I actually kind of came up with it on the stage, but my answer would be, it's the flip side of what you just said. Small businesses are going to increasingly give us new artificial intelligence type tools. They're going to create boutique solutions, and there will be a boutique industry. That's my prediction. And I think because of that, and as we see the value of that, it will help us solve the problem of getting to them. Because right now we think out of fairness we need to increase small business participation, but in the future we're going to think out of necessity we need to increase small business participation. So that's my prediction.
Absolutely, thank you. And one other question.
Sir.
A lot of folks will say the reason the federal government doesn't get to utilizing technology to the extent it can is because everyone's worried that it's going to take over their jobs. How do you deal with that fear?
Look, I was saying earlier, my goal is to help you use ProPricer more by using it less. If the sole existence of your job is just to use that pricing solution, then you're probably not doing a very good job. What you have to do, the productivity gains that you get from using a solution like that, allow you to do the rest of your job more, to where you're not always feeling like, I can't leave work yet, or I'm here at the 11th hour trying to get something done, or I've got this backlog of stuff. It's a way to help you become more productive, not to restrict you.
Yeah, I say something similar. Technology should free up your time. I talked about the rudimentary parts of the job, maybe the compliance reviews, the initial analysis and plug and chug of the numbers that you would typically do. You can do the higher order thinking, the critical thinking, and the negotiation so that I can get a good deal. That's what I would say that time should be spent doing.
And I'll be blunt in responding to that one. I mean, really blunt.
I knew you would.
A lot of my fellow baby boomers might be thinking that way. But as we retire or expire, we're going to solve some of that problem. And as IT makes for more efficiency, the generations behind us, the millennials, the Gen Zers, will be saying, hallelujah, hallelujah, this is great. We're more efficient. I've been telling those old people that we can do things a little faster.
So just get out of the way, right?
Pretty much. That's even more blunt than me. Thank you.
Hey, guys, join me in thanking Mr. Dr. Wooten and his panel. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Don't go anywhere. All right, this is our last panel for the afternoon. Before you go, to your next session, and some of you have signed up for this marvelous thing called matchmaking. You know the tables that you're going to, so please take advantage of that. Don't forget this evening we have our 5:30 session out on the yard again where you had lunch. Don't forget to do that. And oh, by the way, don't get stuck out there and not come back tomorrow morning. Thank you again and have a good evening.